On your Wednesday episode of Locked On Raptors, yes, Cooper Flagg is the number one prize in this upcoming draft, but don't sleep on Dylan Harper.
You are Locked On Raptors, your daily Toronto Raptors podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, what's going on? And welcome to another episode of Locked On Raptors, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It is Wednesday, April the 23rd, and I am your host, Sean Woodley. I've been covering the Toronto Raptors now for 11 seasons on various platforms. You can find all my work over on Blue Sky. You can find the show on Instagram. You can join us in the Locked On Raptors Discord server. Link in the description of the podcast. Free to join. As always, you can also subscribe for free to the daily Locked On Raptors newsletter. QR code on the screen. Go check it out if you haven't yet. If you're watching on video, if you're listening on audio, link in the description of the podcast. It's 100% free, and you get words from me 5 days a week about your Toronto Raptors and other stuff going on throughout the NBA playoffs, mixing it up a little bit these days to keep things fresh and to, talk about the actual basketball that's happening a little bit with some Raptors tie-ins as well. Lots of Raptors, old pals, cooking in the playoffs. Pascal Siakam, we'll talk about him a little bit later on in the show. Kawhi Leonard, OG Anunoby, et cetera, et cetera. It's all being covered in the newsletter. Please go subscribe. It's much appreciated when you do it. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at Game Time, the single best place to buy tickets for stuff. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDINNBA for $20 off your first purchase. And we're off and running here on a show where, yes, later on we are going to, spread some love, throw some flowers towards Pascal Siakam. I may even eat a little bit of crow as it pertains to the Pascal Siakam trade. Maybe that was just a win-win for everybody. We'll get to that a little bit later on. But off the top, I want to talk about Dylan Harper. I talked about Cooper Flagg on Monday's episode of the show, and I'm going to keep in the next couple of weeks here before the lottery in 2 weeks minus a couple days, or 3 weeks minus a couple days. I'm going to keep talking about guys who may not be on the board when the Raptors are most likely to pick. It is far more likely that the Raptors will pick either 7th, 8th, or 9th in the draft than it is that they will jump into the top 4. And so while we can, we're going to run through some of those top-end prospects. And if it happens that the Raptors jump up and we got to talk about these guys again, oh, bother. We have to talk about really cool NBA prospects again. What are we going to do with our lives? Let's talk about Dylan Harper. We'll get into sort of what his addition to the Raptors would mean for the franchise, the build, everything like we did with Cooper Flagg on Monday. But let's just run through the tail of the tape on Dylan Harper, freshman out of Rutgers, 6'6" guard, put up 19.4 points, 4.6 boards, 4 assists as a freshman, 1.4 steals, 0.6 blocks, shot 57.4% on twos. He's good at hitting twos, 33.3% from deep, 58.7 true shooting percentage overall, carrying a massive offensive burden for a not particularly good Rutgers team. And you may think, wow, that team didn't even make the tournament. They had Dylan Harper, Ace Bailey. Something must be wrong with Dylan Harper and Ace Bailey, because how do those guys not carry a team to a championship unless they're flawed themselves? And look, no one's a perfect prospect. I'm sure Harper and Bailey would tell you there's stuff they still got to work on, but that Rutgers team had a really bad supporting cast, and they just could not stay afloat when Dylan Harper and or Ace Bailey were not on the floor. Both those guys had wildly positive on-off differentials. When it comes to Harper, a plus 2.2 net rating on the floor, a minus 8.8 net rating off. That stat courtesy our pal over at Hoop Intellect, Keandre, a wonderful NBA draft mind. Go watch his breakdowns. They're the very best. Rutgers won their minutes when Dylan Harper played and got absolutely smashed when he wasn't on the floor. All you can do is control for what you can control as a player. And in the minutes that Dylan Harper could control, which was a lot of the minutes, he played a heavy burden for this team this season. They won when he was on the floor. That seems to check off the sort of any concern there might be over whether or not he's like a winning player, or if there's like some massive glaring issue with him as a prospect. And look, he's an imperfect prospect, as basically every prospect to ever enter the NBA is. We'll get into some of that here. But overall, he is the guy who has been sort of pretty much ordained to be the second pick in the draft all year long. And I think it's justified. To me, he has the second best chance of any prospect in this class of becoming like an organizational pillar type player, the kind of guy that you're thrilled to be building around, a guy who has upside as an offensive engine, though I don't know if he's a sure thing on that regard. Like, I think Cooper Flagg is probably the only sure thing in this draft. If sure things exist in the draft, Cooper Flagg is the closest thing. Dylan Harper, a little bit below that, but I'd probably put him above some of these other guys that are going to come in behind him in the draft order if all goes chalk. I think, there are a couple guys who I think if they really hit their like super high end outcomes, maybe they end up better players than Dylan Harper. A guy like Jeremiah Fears comes to mind, where like very much like a wide range of outcomes for him. It's kind of a home run swing. It's either all going to really work or it's just not. But if everything really breaks right for Fears, I could see him being the number one guard prospect in this draft when all is said and done. Not prospect, just like the best player, the best guard, out of this draft in 5-10 years, whatever we want to do to determine, when a draft was good or bad or whatever. I think Kaman Malawach, I've talked a lot about. I think his defensive upside is so immense that like he's just going to have an incredible impact on the floor. So I think maybe you could say he's got maybe higher upside if everything breaks right. If he starts hitting threes, all that stuff, then the ceiling really pops off for him, and maybe he becomes a better player down the line than Dylan Harper. But Harper feels almost like a safe bet to become just a damn good all-star level player in the NBA. Again, as safe as bets can get. We say this all the time. Scoot Henderson was a no doubt sure thing, and it's taken Scoot Henderson quite a while to come along, and he may never reach the heights that he was supposed to be sort of capable of when you looked at that draft and it was like, well, there's Wemby and there's Scoot, and then there's everybody else. The draft is weird. It's very hard to pin down. I do think the Raptors tend to give guys a pretty good chance of hitting their higher end outcomes because they're pretty good at this development thing, as it turns out. That was a calling card of theirs back in the day and still is today. But yeah, back to the sort of tail of the tape on Dylan Harper, the player. He lives at the rim. This is the thing to know. 6'6" guard who can get to the rim at will. He doesn't do it by being like a Ja Morant style, just like I'm going to punch every gap and dunk on every head type of guy. He's way more about sort of craft and footwork and head fakes and bobs and, pumps and things like that. He's got, I think, just like really, really good footwork and craft. Once he gets it inside like 10 feet, I feel like his finishing moves are really special. He can kind of get into spots where it looks like, oh, he might be kind of walled off here. And then all of a sudden he pulls out like a beautiful little pirouette or something, and he's laying it in. That's the thing with Dylan Harper is you get him into the trees, you get him in the forest, you get him in traffic. He's going to make good decisions, and he's probably going to score because he's just got that sort of dexterity. He has a good sort of understanding of where he is in space from what you watch of him on film. And it's, he's a really interesting guard prospect. Again, a 6'6" guard who can kind of create for you. It's a really wonderful thing to come across if you're trying to build a team. The rim stuff. I mean, if you think about how the rim stuff would work in the context of the Raptors, I mean, the Raptors are a team that gets to the rim a lot. They were the number 3 team in rim frequency this season. They've always been a higher rim frequency team under Darko Rajakovic, but a lot of their rim shots come as the sort of result of actions as opposed to just a guy being like, I'm going to the rim now. You can't stop me. Whereas, Harper, I think, would be a nice sort of guy to be a bit of a fail safe in those situations, or maybe the system, the sort of ball movement, quick decisions, kind of one advantage layers onto another, and eventually you create a good look. Sometimes that doesn't work and you're 20 seconds into the shot clock and you need someone to make something happen. Swings to Dylan Harper at the top. He can make something happen by getting to the rim and finishing. Damn good rim finisher. And again, 57.4% on all twos. That's really, really good for a guard. Talked about the footwork a little bit. I think, the shooting is going to be the thing here with Dylan Harper that probably determines what his upside is as a creative force in the league. He was not a good pull-up three-point shooter this season. He was a pretty decent catch-and-shoot guy, 37%. I think you could comfortably think, hey, like he can fit in and play off the ball. He can make stuff happen. He's not this kind of guy who has to have the ball to be effective, which is always a tough type of player to build around, and is often the type of player you're picking near the top of the draft because their entire life has been spent being the guy on the ball. And so it's tough to kind of change those ways once you get to the pros. It seems like Harper's got some ability to play off the ball. He's, a good slasher. He gets to, it swings to him on the 45 after, a post up and a kick out and a swing around the horn. And I think Dylan Harper is the kind of guy who's going to be able to attack that closeout and score. Again, the rim scoring is really impressive. The passing, once he gets into the teeth of the defense, is pretty good as well. That's maybe an area where there's got to be some refinement. And part of it is he probably didn't get to kind of flash his full creative juice as a guy who saw a ton of attention in college and played with not so good teammates. And so the assist numbers probably muted a little bit because he was probably setting dudes up who were bricking things routinely, because that's the Rutgers way, baby. But yeah, I think the decision-making would certainly fit in with what the Raptors want to do, the slashing. And if he's going to hit a reasonable number of catch and shoot threes, that's a starting point. That feels like a pretty good baseline to say, hey, like this guy, you can bring him in. You don't have to play helio ball with him. You can, run him with other good players, run him off the ball, do a little bit of mix and matching with him and Immanuel Quickley, which we'll talk about the fit of in a second here. But that's kind of the rundown on Dylan Harper. Defensively, I think he's going to end up being pretty solid just because he's functionally very big at his position. 6'6", can probably guard like 1, 2, 3, maybe. Probably never going to be like an all defense type of guy, but like perfectly adequate guard defender. Seems very much within the realm of possibility just because he's big, and being big in basketball is good. Overall, really good prospect. The Raptors are absolutely laughing if they're lucky enough to move up to number 2 and get him. It's pretty awesome. And the reason I think it's awesome is we talked about how the fit of Cooper Flagg would be fascinating on the Raptors, and the way the defense around a Flagg Barnes duo could really just kind of take off to new heights. I think there's a lot to like about the way Dylan Harper would fit into the team, even if he never becomes like a lead number 1, no doubt creative engine. It's a lot of power in having a lot of really good number 2s around. We'll talk about what Harper would look like on the Raptors, how it would fit, and why I think a backcourt of Harper and Quickley, sounds pretty dope. We'll get to that coming up in just 1 second. Today's show is brought to you by our pals over at Game Time, the single best place to buy tickets for stuff you want to go to, whether it's sporting events, concerts. It's summertime, baby. Lots of concerts on deck. Very exciting. You've got theater shows, et cetera, et cetera. They're a wonderful place to go buy tickets for any event that you want to go to. And there's nothing like the atmosphere of a playoff game. If you're trying to get some tickets to a Leafs playoff game, maybe you're up in Ottawa. I know we have some listeners up there and you're a Leafs fan. You want to go to game 3 or 4 as the Leafs complete this sweep of the pathetic Ottawa Senators this week. You can go grab your tickets over at Game Time by perusing Game Time picks. They filter out the fluff, pick only the best deals for you, and last-minute deals are a big deal over at Game Time. You can save up to 60% off by buying last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, theater. I know that because I've done it before. I've told you on the show before. I've bought tickets for a WNBA game literally standing at the door of Climate Pledge Arena in Seattle, pulled up my phone and said, hey, let's go to this game right now that starts in 20 minutes because we just happened to be walking by as it was going on, and boom, we're in the game for like $6 a pop. What a wonderful thing. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Down the Game Time app. Create an account. Use the code LOCKEDNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account. Redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets. Lowest price guaranteed. Back out here talking Dylan Harper, who would be really cool on the Toronto Raptors. And let's get into what it would mean for the team, both kind of next season and into the future. I mean, the fit is fascinating. It might be just like the simplest kind of, plug and play fit of any guy the Raptors could take, and look, this is going to upset the RJ Barrett crowd because everyone loves RJ Barrett, as they should. RJ Barrett's very cool, but rookie potential star guard who is going to be on a rookie contract coming in, like eventually, if it's not right away, eventually the plan will be for him to take up that second spot next to Immanuel Quickley in the backcourt. And again, you could maybe trade Immanuel Quickley if you thought Dylan Harper could be like your go-to full-time point guard. You got to see what he's capable of at the NBA level before you make that call, I think. And just RJ, again, it's not out of any desire to just move on from RJ because he's not good, because he is good, but the situation financially is what it is. And if the team does not want to pay the tax, he's going to be the guy who is very likely to be the casualty of that. But again, they can pay the tax and not worry about it. And I think that is plan number 1 for me. Have more good players on the team. To me, that feels like the way to do it. But let's get into the fit with Immanuel Quickley, because I do think the fit there is pretty awesome to think about. I just think it's so seamless. It would unleash Quickley to be an off-ball shooting threat, this gravity bomb you throw into your team that just sucks all this defensive attention away from everybody else. And like to have him as like your 3rd, 4th option flying around off the ball in those situations, pretty exciting stuff. Gives Dylan Harper a ton of space to work. I think the idea of running guard pick and roll, where Quickley is screening for Dylan Harper and then flaring out to the wing, as we know the Raptors like to do with him working off of Scotty Barnes. You get Harper either switched onto a smaller guy, whoever is guarding Quickley, and you can go to work as a 6'6" mismatch hunter against a smaller guard, or you use that screen, you get downhill, you use the gravity of Immanuel Quickley, kind of drawing the attention away, and you just become Dylan Harper, paint touch machine, who has shown that he can score damn well when he gets into those areas. I think that's a really interesting sort of two-man game they could run. Obviously, Quickley's pretty good on the ball as well. You could run him with Dylan Harper. Harper can, like I talked about before, spot up off the ball, be at the 45, be in the corner, attack off of that when the ball swings to him and the defense is compromised. All very exciting as a backcourt duo, super dynamic, probably ages into being one of the more dynamic offensive backcourts in the Eastern Conference. And, obviously you need time for this to happen. And the maturation process for Harper will take years because he's 18 years old and guards take time. But the idea of those two guys paired together, just the skill set overlap and the complementariness, is that a word? I don't know. The way their skills complement one another is pretty impressive stuff. I think also, there's all kinds of other fun little pick and roll and dribble handoff stuff you could run with Harper, little dribble handoff stuff with Jakob Poeltl to get him moving downhill, DHOs with Scotty Barnes to get him downhill, classic pick and roll with Scotty Barnes, pick and roll with Brandon Ingram in a similar way that you did it with, and maybe this is a way to kind of get switches for Ingram, where you run a pick and roll with Ingram as the screener, and then Harper's guy switches onto Ingram, and then all of a sudden you have 6'8" Brandon Ingram with a guard on him. Like, there's all kinds of stuff you could play around with. I think it's super fun. Like, just lots of good players, having a bunch of guys who can handle the ball, do stuff with it, interacting with one another on the floor in 2 and 3 man actions. Like, that's just a recipe for really fun, interesting basketball to watch. And I'm kind of into it very much so. When it comes to the sort of team build for next year and what the roster looks like, we get to the RJ Barrett conundrum, right? Where it's, RJ Barrett, do you move him this summer if you get Dylan Harper for some kind of roster balancing trade, duck the tax, et cetera, et cetera? Or do you do what I think sounds fun and hang on to RJ Barrett, maybe move someone like Ochai Agbaji to duck the tax if you must duck the tax, and then you just hand the keys to the second unit as a rookie to Dylan Harper, where he gets basically the run of the second unit. He gets to play with all these guys who are going to fly around off the ball, space for him. You get the shooting of Grady Dick and Jacoby Walter in particular working off of him. Maybe you sprinkle in a Brandon Ingram to help take up some of the burden, or a Scotty Barnes, whatever it might be. And you just kind of give Dylan Harper 25 minutes a night of just reps running the show. That feels like a pretty all right way to kind of kickstart a guy's development to me. Kind of what I think the Rockets should have done with Reed Sheppard this year, where they draft Reed Sheppard 3rd overall. He's this very interesting prospect everyone seems to like. I was never super high, but hey, could be proven wrong because I'm proven wrong in the draft all the time. But they didn't really use him this year because they were trying to win games, and they just felt like they couldn't really throw him out there to kind of take those reps. Not that the Raptors won't be trying to win games next year, but I think they'll have enough kind of across the board talent. And if you're getting the 2nd overall pick in Harper, who comes into the league as a way more advanced prospect than Reed Sheppard was in a not very good draft where he went 3rd overall, Harper's going to go 2nd overall in a pretty solid draft at the top. I think there's a more reasonable expectation you could bake in that Harper could, in theory, be an effective player running the second unit from day one. There'll be lumps, as there are with any rookie guard, but I think if you wanted to hang on to RJ Barrett and just go into the season with the most talent on hand as possible, just as many good players as you can fit into the clown car of good players going into the year, I think that's a viable way to facilitate Harper's development while also just not kind of moving on from RJ Barrett because you feel like you have to. Again, you can do it anytime, right? Before the deadline. If you need to duck the tax and you don't want to pay it by a season's end, you can get out of the tax before the deadline and not pay the tax at season's end. The tax bill comes due at the end of the year, not at the start. And so the optionality you have is pretty interesting. And we know the Raptors love to have optionality. Ultimately, I just think even if Harper's not like a no doubt number one creator, putting him in a lineup with Quickley, Ingram, Scotty, Poeltl, really interesting long term. Putting him into a second unit with a lot of guys who can work off and space around him will be a much more friendly environment than he ever had in the cramped confines of Rutgers basketball this past season. You can bring him along a little slower. You don't have to rush him into this thing where he's just carrying this massive usage as an 18, 19-year-old, just getting his feet wet. I think that's a fine thing to do to bring a guy along and kind of, just facilitate proper development. He'll still play a lot. probably close a lot of games. He'll probably be given lots of rope because that's what you do when you have a high lottery pick. But it won't be a situation where you just like must play him 35 minutes a night and give him a 30% usage rate because you've got a lot of other guys there in support. Longer term, again, I love the idea of Quickley, Harper, Ingram, Scotty Yak as like a starting lineup in the next couple of years. That sounds super fun. Again, I think the more good players, the more creative players you have in a lineup, it's just kind of like an amplifier, right? If you're someone who plays Balatro, it's like having an X3 card at the end of your deck of jokers, just like, okay, and then another X3, and then another X3. It's beautiful. It kind of layers on top of one another, all these guys who can make something happen with the ball, create advantages, compromise the defense, and then all of a sudden you're getting really good looks from guys who are talented enough to make them, which has obviously been a thing they've been lacking for the last couple of years. It probably doesn't have the same long-term, like no doubt franchise shifting upside impact that getting Cooper Flagg would, because Cooper Flagg is a monster and a really, really excellent prospect, one of the best college prospects we've seen this millennium. He's damn good, but it's not far off. And I don't think you can overstate the value of getting a potential star on a rookie deal in the apron era, getting a Dylan Harper in the door, to making the 2nd overall picks rookie slot, which is not cheap, but it's not a max contract by any means. I just think it really helps you when you're trying to do this whole thing, which it seems like the Raptors are doing until they can go and get themselves a star, which is this notion of becoming a greater than the sum of its parts type of team, where you just have a lot of good players, a lot of individual parts that comprise together something pretty interesting once put all on the floor with one another. And look, if you can't get a no-brainer number one, which might not be possible. If you don't get Cooper Flagg, there might not just be a number one no-brain lead guard, offensive engine type available in this draft. But if you can't get that, getting a bunch of pretty good number twos and threes to work with one another is a damn good backup plan. And I think that is kind of the effect that Dylan Harper could have, like, if things go kind of a medium outcome for him. If he becomes a star, then great. Things get really interesting really quick once again. Like they do with Cooper Flagg, but I don't think you could bank on it quite as much as like a sure thing as you can with Cooper Flagg. Still, getting Dylan Harper at number 2 will be pretty sweet. It's like the second best possible outcome for this year's draft for the Raptors. Sounds obvious. You get the second pick, and that's your second best outcome. But Harper, I just think the fit would be awesome, and there's a lot you could do with him going forward on this team. A reminder, 7.8% chance the Raptors have at drafting number 2. Unlikely he falls to 3 or 4 at this rate, it seems. Things can happen. Who the hell knows? But that's what you're looking at is 7.5% chance at number 1 for Cooper Flagg, 7.8% chance at number 2 for Dylan Harper. So there's like a 15% chance one of those guys will be a Toronto Raptor. You could do worse. It's not so bad. It's the draft. It's the draft lottery. It's all crapshoot. It's all random. It's not a bad way to go into it. It's exciting times. So we're going to come back on the other side, and we're going to talk about a guy who no longer plays for the Toronto Raptors, who will not play for the Toronto Raptors next season or in the future, but who I still love dearly, and who I think is, with his play combined with where the Raptors sit now, I think I'm finally willing to put to bed the notion that the Raptors completely, totally bungled the Pascal Siakam trade. They still bungled some parts of it, but I've made my peace with it. And I'm just happy to see Pascal cooking. We're going to get to that coming up to close out the show in just one sec. Today's show is brought to you by Amazon Fire TV. And did you know that your Fire TV is also an Xbox? Yeah, you can turn any TV into your gaming and entertainment hub with Fire TV Stick 4K devices. No console required. Just grab your paired controller, subscribe, or sign into Xbox Game Pass Ultimate with EA Play included, and you're ready to play. Dive into hundreds of premium titles from EA Sports College Football 25, Call of Duty Black Ops 6, and Avowed. I bet Balatro's on there too, if we're going to talk about games that I love and have been talking about on this podcast routinely. Any chance I get a chance to do so as easily as you've ever streamed your favorite shows. It's gaming made simple, and it's all on your Fire TV. Again, I'm a video game guy. I'm not like, I wouldn't classify myself as like a super duper hardcore gamer. I'm very much into when I'm feeling it, I'll get into it. having Game Pass on my TV would be pretty darn sweet. Because yeah, it just lets you play all these titles. I'm a big fan of playing a sports game. I used to very much do that in my youth, not so much these days, but if I could tap into like an NHL video game on my Fire TV, that would be pretty darn sweet. Head to Amazon.com/Fire TV Locked On to get started today. Xbox Game Pass, Ultimate subscription and compatible controller required, available on select devices, including Fire TV Stick 4K 2nd Gen, Fire TV Sticks 4K Max, 1st and 2nd Gen, and Fire TV Cube 3rd Gen. Go check it out. Wrapping it up here on your Wednesday edition of Locked On Raptors. Moving away from Dylan Harper in the draft for a hot second to talk about a guy who's cooking the Milwaukee Bucks as he's wont to do. Pascal Siakam. Pacers up 2-0. Siakam averaging like 24, 9, and 3 on super efficient shooting, not missing free throws, hitting 50% of his threes so far against the Bucks. They got no answer because Pascal Siakam is damn good, baby. And I think watching Siakam thrive here for the Pacers and seeing him be just this perfect complement to what that team does. All of his strengths are amplified on this team that plays hair on fire offense and runs a ton, playing with a guard like Tyrese Halliburton. I mean, it's very clear. Pascal Siakam playing with a pull-up shooting guard is kind of just instant buckets for your team. This was the case when he played with Kyle Lowry. This was the case when he and Fred VanVleet were at the peak of their powers. This would have been the case, I think, had he played with Immanuel Quickley for longer than he got to. And to see him playing with Tyrese Halliburton, one of the very best types, very best versions of that type of guard in the league, has been an absolute delight. And I'm just ready to accept that this trade, contingent a little upon what happens with Brandon Ingram, of course. We still got to see him actually play and see how it fits and all of that. But I do think I'm taking as close to a full view of the trade as we can now. It feels like it's just a win-win for everyone involved, which, hey, like, congrats to the Raptors for pulling that one out of their asses, man, because did not look good for a while there. I still have a lot of problems to go full-on Festivus airing of grievances on you. I got a lot of problems with how the Raptors handled the Siakam trade in the lead-up. If they wanted to trade him, they probably should have just traded him in July after Fred VanVleet walked and they realized, oh crap, this whole thing's coming to an end. We kind of want to trade Pascal Siakam. Let's just get it done. Maybe they don't end up with the return they ended up getting. It's hard to say. Could they have gotten something more? Who knows? But I think, honestly, just like the specter of the waiting Siakam trade hanging over the first half of last year was a nightmare. It sucked. That start of last season is some of the most miserable I've ever been watching the Toronto Raptors as Dennis Schroeder was handed the keys to the team. They clearly were just like, yeah, Pascal, I mean, you're here. We don't really want you here. Like, this was like media day stuff. It was bad. It was awful. It was poorly handled. It was kind of a bit of a, showing up the ass a little bit in public for the front office in a way they don't often do. They're usually pretty tidy with their business. This was sloppy. This was messy. This wasn't handled very well. And yet we're sitting here a year later and Pascal Siakam is living his best life in Indiana, looking awesome. He's probably not going to make All NBA, but he certainly had a case for a third-team All NBA, as he routinely does because he's a damn good player. Really has just settled into a beautiful role on that team. He's not asked to do everything like he was on the Raptors for times. He just gets to be a really nice second banana to Tyrese Halliburton with a lot of other good supporting players working around him. It seems to have worked out beautifully for them. He got paid, of course. The Raptors were maybe not super keen on paying him the max. He got the max from Indiana. That's great. The Raptors now, 15 months later, they get Brandon Ingram on the team. He's making about $10 million less a year than Pascal Siakam is. So that's good. Like, you're happy with that. If you're the Raptors, I think you feel comfortable with the number you handed out for Ingram. Had you been able to get Siakam for $40 million a year, I think you would have been pretty happy with that if you're the Raptors, but it clearly wasn't the way things were going to go. They didn't feel comfortable with it, timelines, etc., whatever. I'm still of the mind that Scottie and Pascal could have worked together. They were the only thing that worked about that team last year was anytime those guys were on the floor together, things were pretty awesome and humming along, and they looked damn good kind of figuring one another out. But I do think Ingram is a slightly better fit because of the shooting, a little bit better in terms of just like self-creation than Pascal was, which is a big thing to have next to Scottie Barnes, I think, as we learned this year. And so you add in, of course, on top of Ingram, the remaining parts of that trade, of course, there's a lot of stages of that trade where you get Bruce Brown, and then are you going to trade Bruce Brown, and then you opt in for Bruce Brown, and then all of a sudden, are you ever going to get anything for Bruce Brown? Is it kind of just a lost cause? I think I said at one point this past season that like the Pascal deal is an L. Take the L. Nothing you do with Bruce Brown is going to change that. Then they go pull this Brandon Ingram buy low thing out, and it's like, okay, maybe there's a reason these guys are in front offices and I'm not. I'm like, sure, all right, it worked out. You, of course, get Ochai Agbaji as part of that mix as well as the return for one of the picks you got back for Pascal. They flipped to the Jazz. They got Kelly Olynyk and Ochai Agbaji back. Ochai's a rotation player. He's like an 8th, 9th man on a good team, I think. A guy you're happy to have around. Maybe he's not long for this team. Maybe they flip him for some kind of big man help or something. Who's to say? But having Ochai as part of that deal is nice. And then, of course, Jacoby Walter is really the other big thing from that trade on top of Ingram. When you kind of game out the full transaction tree, you get that pick from the Pacers in a draft where you didn't have your own pick because you sent it away for Jakob Poeltl. You get Jacoby Walter, who I think, had he played a full season, I think he would have had a real case for at least a second team all rookie. I think there's a case that you could go back and redraft and say, hey, he's probably a lottery pick. He's damn good, really exciting. He's got future starter written all over him. I think in particular with the way he kind of fits with the guys they have. If they get Dylan Harper, then it's less of an obvious fit, but because Harper probably supplants him as that long-term number 2 of the future. But really like Jacoby Walter quite a bit. Fun player. Harper Walter backcourt sometimes. That sounds pretty cool. Give me Dylan Harper. It sounds pretty awesome. Either way, the final toll of that deal being Siakam for Ingram, Walter, and Agbaji. Again, depending on what you see from Ingram, feels like you can kind of go to bed and rest easy with that one. And again, this is all made better because Pascal Siakam is just in a wonderful situation for him. I would have loved for Pascal Siakam to have been a Raptor for life. I think there was a way to make it happen if they really wanted to try to do it. They obviously did not. And again, I think because of the way they've transformed this roster over the last 15 months, it makes me feel a lot better about the end result. Still hate the way they handled it. I think they hung him out to dry and really kind of mistreated him on the way out. Didn't love that. But if the final result is Pascal Siakam is happy, the Raptors are a deeper team because of this trade. They turned one really good player into 3 guys who are rotation guys. It's hard to argue that this didn't work out for both sides pretty well. And I'm just thrilled I get to watch Pascal Siakam now without rooting. They traded that pick to get Brandon Ingram, the Pacers pick. We're not rooting against the Pacers for draft purposes. We just get to watch Pascal Siakam cook. It's pretty awesome, man. And to see him kind of have this moment against the Bucks, again, a team he's vanquished many times in the past. It's really cool. And I'm really happy for him. And I'm just thrilled to see Siakam thriving on a team that just kind of understands exactly what he is as a player and how to get the best out of him. Hitting his threes, man. It's all great. So yeah, just wanted to throw some love. Pascal Siakam moves away and eat a tiny little plate of crow regarding the Pascal Siakam trade, which I've panned on this podcast in the past. Seems to have worked out just fine for everybody. No harm done, except for that first 6 months of will they, won't they, which still sucked and was terrible and led to a lot of Dennis Schroeder in my life. Anyway, we're going to leave it there. Thank you so much for rocking with the show. We'll be back again on Thursday for a fun one. It's our goriest episode of the year as Joseph Fischaro and I go back and look at our preseason bold predictions. I think I got a couple kind of almost right. I got one hilariously wrong. I'm very much looking forward to digging into that with our pal Joey Cash to continue this week of eating crow, I guess. And then on Friday, Cause from the Locked On Raptors Discord, the winner of the Locked On Raptors Fantasy League, will hop on the podcast, and I'm going to roast him about how he thinks the Luka Doncic trade is good. Crazy. He's an insane man. He's the nemesis that I have in the Discord. It's a fun thing. It's an ongoing back and forth. It's all above board. It's fine, but God. Either way, looking forward to that. It's going to be a fun show on Friday. And yeah, thanks so much for rocking with the show. We'll be back again on Thursday on the episode of Locked On Raptors. Follow, subscribe, rate, review. Go to the QR code on the screen for the newsletter. Link in the description of the podcast. All that good stuff. Talk to you soon. Thanks for hanging. Bye-bye. Oh, damn, close.